Welcome everyone. On behalf of TCS Ion Direct Academy channel, I welcome you all to the talk show on the topic Digital Transformation in Auto Component Industry, Opportunities and Challenges. I'm Megha Senroy. I'm a lawyer by profession, have been in this industry for 16 years now, currently with TCS Ion as a business consultant. I would like to give you a brief overview about what we are going to discuss today, right? So basically, as you all know, customer expectations have placed tremendous pressure on the automakers to change the way they establish their strategies and manage their organizations. New requirements to incorporate information and interactivity quickly drive up cost and complexity, which we all know. At the same time, the auto industry must be more creative to capture a larger share of consumers' attention and overall transportation spend, both in and beyond usage of vehicles. Automotive enterprises have a long used information technology to improve productivity and efficiency. Well, reaching to the new markets and optimizing supply chains, as we all know. The fields of mobility services and connected services will have a huge research and influence on the future of this business. So when we have some findings, we can see that up to 76% of organizations are investing in the emerging digital technology in order to stay competitive. Right? In addition, artificial intelligence, AI as we all call, right, will handle 15% of all customer service transactions by the year 2021, which is an increase, it's an exponential increase of all about more than 400% from 2017. So let's understand from the expert we have today with us, how can automakers best take advantage of the digital opportunity to innovate and grow exponentially and scale up to the new directions and new heights. A very warm welcome to Mr. R.K. Shenoy, a member of Executive Management Board, Mobility Solutions, Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions Private Limited. Mr. R.K. Shenoy has been associated with Bosch Group since 1986 and currently a member of the Executive Management Board responsible for mobility solutions. He carries about 6 years of international experience in Germany, including the role of customer liaison and leading electronic controllers development for European customers. Initially, he was responsible for industrial automation in RBIN. Later, he moved on to embedded software development for engine management systems, and then to car multimedia and automotive safety systems. He was also instrumental in setting up hardware development and product engineering with special focus on frugal engineering and emerging market platforms. He was also responsible Global Center for Powertrain Electronics and setting up of new business teams for aerospace, off-highway, railways, smart city businesses, and air quality solutions. Prior to the current role that he's in, he was heading the Embedded Solutions and Product Engineering Business Unit for mobility, consumer goods, industrial, energy, and building technology. Mr. Shenoy holds a bachelor's degree in Electronics and Communication from National Institute of Technology, Surat. Welcome, Mr. Shenoy, to the talk show today, and we're very happy to have you on board.
Thank you, Megha.
Yeah. So before we begin, Mr. Shenoy, would you like to share a few thoughts before we start, having the interaction further on with the questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
it's my pleasure to be on this event to talk about what's happening in mobility and especially the trends related to digitization and how the world is changing with respect to what we engineer for these markets. There are a lot of things that are happening around us, primarily the way we look at mobility. And today it's my pleasure to share a few thoughts on it and talk about what's happening and what are the opportunities around that, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shenoy. It's indeed a pleasure and an honor for all of us to hear you, your experiences that would really, give us a lot of insights to know more about the automotive industry, where you have really spent decades now, and you've reached somewhere where you can actually, talk and discuss more about it, and you can share your learnings with us. It's really definitely a good learn for us. So I would like to just ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I would want to know, how do you see the digital disruption in the automotive industry, and how does it impact the mobility supplier?
Yeah. I would like to share a few slides which can probably depict what's happening before I get into the details. One second. To start with, of course, I put this picture intentionally, which shows a lucrative view of a city where there's a lot of space for pedestrians, and of course you see limited space for vehicles. While we can talk quite a lot on smart cities and how the future cities will look like, today's discussion, of course, I would be keen to talk more on mobility alone and how it's changing within mobility. What is happening is the boundary condition change, of course. The changes that you see, the behavior from the mobility users moving more towards shared mobility and user-oriented way of adapting the mobility that is required for each and every user. Of course, the urban mobility is quite different, more and more people being in cities. There are big challenges with respect to congestion as well as pollution itself. More interest is going into the environment, and people are talking more on how we protect the environment and be sustainable than only managing the fundamentals of mobility, which is of course needed. And with the trade war coming up, the Brexit happening, and COVID, of course, in the last more than a year now, where people are moved more into working from home and various adjustments that have been done, all this, of course, impacts more. The answer to this, of course, we look at more from the trends, what's happening. In short, I would put it the term PACE: personalized, automated, connected, and electrified. The personalization of the vehicles, one from the user in the car itself, is a big change that's happening, of course. Gone are the days where you have standard cars with standard fitment coming up, but each one would like to tune in their vehicles in such a way that is able to connect to the environment better. You can use or bring in the third living space aspects into the car, and using also shared mobility where you use an app, book a vehicle which you need and use it itself. Automation is another big aspect. Of course, people mistake this for autonomous cars itself. There are actually various levels of automation that's happening. Simple things which started off with saying, okay, automated gearbox or automated wiper control, headlight control and things like that. And now it's coming to even managing more and more stretches of drives which can be automatically managed using various sensors that are there in the car, including cameras or radar or lidar. You can increase the amount of automation. Of course, the highest level would eventually be fully autonomous robotaxis probably. Connectivity is another big aspect. It's clear that without connectivity, we don't see any vehicles anymore, especially in markets where everything is getting connected. Every gadget in the house, the car itself becomes a part of the internet, and digital impacts quite a lot here. How you use your smartphone, how do you use the infrastructure, much better to use the information within the car itself. And last but not least, of course, with the concern for environment and to be more green, completely electrified vehicles would be the ultimate, but of course there's a long way to go there. Why I mean long way is I'm talking about various segments of mobility. There could be different stages, whether it's two-wheeler or three-wheelers moving into electrification, and larger vehicles going into hybrid when you have stop and go. But finally, even commercial vehicles and larger vehicles would eventually go to electrified. But they may use various technologies, whether it's fuel cell or any other methods of running automated driving along with electrified. Now, when you come to electronics, meanwhile, more than 50% of value of a car is becoming electronics, and the number of controllers that are there are continuously increasing. Even an entry-level car has, meanwhile, minimum 5 to 7 controllers. But high-end cars, of course, have 60 to 70 controllers, which means it's a very complex E architecture which is there in a vehicle. Good part is, while it developed as more number of controllers with higher computing power that's available, what you will see is consolidation of these into so-called domain controllers or vehicle control units with more of centralized architecture. And this is helping where you can also run features from one controller to the other. For example, earlier when you talked about cruise control or adaptive cruise control, where you try to follow a vehicle in front of you and manage your speed of the vehicle so that you don't collide with it, this feature would run typically on an engine control system. But meanwhile, this could be in a braking system, or it can be in a driver assistance system, or it can be completely hosted in a centralized VCU. And that central VCU manages to communicate with the rest of the VCUs or engine control unit to decide when to accelerate or when to decelerate, and when to do the braking when there is emergency braking requirements. So this means we need more development of integrating systems from one domain to the other. Gone are the days where you would be an expert in an engine controller, but maybe you do not know what's happening on a braking system or a driver assistance system. But now when such features are being developed and deployed in a centralized architecture, which gives you ease of deployment of new features, but at the same time, people who develop this should be much more expert on cross-domain functionalities. So that brings to an aspect of what are the competencies that are needed. It is clear that with stable systems like before, where we were talking about bringing in-vehicle networking, which was CAN, which moving to Ethernet, or model-based development, now it's moving towards more controllers and from microcontroller to microprocessors where there is higher computing power. The competency needed there is also much higher, and with these future E architectures, the systems become complex, as I already mentioned. Cybersecurity is becoming much more of a threat. So each and every controller, when it's connected, we have to ensure that the cybersecurity aspects are taken care. And with continuous development that's happening, the development cycle from from waterfall, moving towards agile way of development becomes the norm. This, of course, enables continuous deployment of features into the field, which is very much needed. And now with the usage of AI or ML and deep learning, the systems are actually, in our terms, becoming more chaotic in the sense of decision making. So we have to ensure that these systems are still predictable and safe when they come onto the market. So while usage of AI helps quite a lot to consolidate and integrate a lot of information that's coming up from various sensors, whether it's from a radar or a video, the decisions that are taken by a car, of course, have to be predictable, and we have to ensure that we are moving towards zero accidents or zero fatalities. So for me, this is more of increased complexity, and the developers have to ensure that they're able to cope up with that. With this, I would stop at this moment and probably get into the conversations of how this impacts our engineering itself of these digital systems in mobility.
Thank you, Mr. Shenoy. It was a good learn. I think a very, very well placed across and a very good presentation. And of course, bringing in topics like, agile, that is something that is really something which every single industry, as you know, is looking forward to. Agility, the DevOps that you were talking about, IoT, these are like the burning needs of the hour. And this is something which every single industry, especially from the automotive section, I think they are, these things put into operation will, of course, will take us to a different height altogether. So yeah, thank you for bringing those topics up. I will quickly move on to the next question that I have for you here, which of course you could let us know that what are technically, what exactly is in your opinion, on the trends, especially when it comes to electrification and automotive driving, etc. You did speak about that as well. When it comes to emerging markets like China and India, so what are your opinions on these trends?
Yeah. It's a very good question. What we see is that each market is going in different ways of implementing, whether it's electrification or automated driving. Just to quote, when you talk about electrification, in markets like India, the number of vehicles, when you look at, of course, they are much more in two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment, where you need electrification. And this is not a focus market for, say, Americas or the European countries. We need to develop systems where the power system, the amount of power that's needed, whether it's segment of 50 kilowatt or 100 kilowatt, because you have cars of much higher power in Europe. And the electrification means increasing this power so that you have thrill of driving these electrified vehicles. Whereas we need to focus on how these cars or two-wheelers and three-wheelers can give a much better fuel efficiency in terms of electrified power that's available, as well as can be managed with different infrastructural challenges we have. Because electrified, if you go to the basics of it and if you have full electric, the number one challenge you have in market like India is the charging infrastructure. Of course, we need to ensure that we are able to get the range that's typically needed in the cities. So my guess is, while for the highways we can still assume that there would be IC engines, but in the city for sure, with congested roads that are available and stop and go traffic, electrified would make sense. So in one way, probably we'll move via the hybrid where you are running with electrified in the cities. But obviously the system costs are much higher. So we'll need to ensure that the power ratios of these vehicles are suited for the markets like India. When it comes to China, of course, there are already projects starting now with fuel cells, because we believe that for larger vehicles, commercial vehicles, fuel cell make much more sense. When the battery technology is still emerging and the battery costs are still high, I guess the fuel cells will be much more economical when we talk about electrified vehicles. When it comes to automated, China is also moving in a direction where they are trying more of information from the infrastructure, which I think is a smart way of doing it, because when you have number of vehicles going up, and if every vehicle needs complex sensors and more sensors in the vehicle and doing a lot of computing on the vehicle, this can be aided much more if you're able to get information from the infrastructure itself. Just to quote an example, instead of checking the condition of the signals that are there on the intersections, if the infrastructure is able to communicate to the vehicle exactly which crossings are actually allowed to drive and which are not, or which roads are more congested and which roads are not, then you can actually optimize your driving pattern of the car in such a way that you can use this information from the infrastructure into the vehicle and optimize it. The amount of computing and optimization that can be done using the cloud technology, you can derive some of the data points from the vehicle, run a lot of algorithm on the cloud, and then send back the data onto the vehicle, because connectivity is anyhow ensured in most part of the modern China. I guess in India also we'll have to think about it, but of course I believe that we would go more from driver assistance features. When you have stop and go, you can, we are seeing that parking sensors coming in a big way. It eases out parking. Next level would be while driving, if you have stop and go in the cities, if you have radar based or video and cost effective, the stress on the driver would significantly come down, where you need not waste your time accelerating and decelerating at every congested road, but vehicle is able to manage the gap with respect to the next vehicle. So these are some of the innovations that would come up, I guess, in these markets and can be locally developed and deployed as well. And that is where there are a lot of opportunities where we need not necessarily only use global solutions, but they can be local or hyper-local solutions that can be used in these situations.
Thank you for the explanation. I think the best thing that I really liked about it was the local bit as well, where you would want the local emerging, they can be the next emerging markets. So I think that is one thing. Surely, I think, because when we are talking about India, we are talking about the common masses, right? It's totally different from what we see abroad. So the market strategy, it's completely different. So I guess in order to reach it out to every single, to everybody out here, the different policies, the strategies have to be completely different here. So I think, so we would really look forward to something like this, especially, if from innovative people like yourself. I think we would look forward that these kinds of things can be made to, use for the local, people here. That would really help. So yeah, thank you for that. Moving on to my next question. Prior to that, when you were, in the initial bit, you were giving us a little bit of an information on the, the challenges that are being faced. So you wanted to even talk about, we were initially talking about the mobility supplier. So just wanted to know, for example, these new mobility solutions that are, that there are going to be a lot of challenges that is going to be faced by companies in order to adopt this, because they've been kind of going on in the traditional method, right? So this is kind of a new thing, right, for them. So how would they overcome this? Because few companies would be a little restrictive, kind of they would want to go as is and, kind of the solution that they've been using so far. So how do you think, how could they overcome these kinds of challenges technically? So if you can give us some information on that.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. One thing that's changing is the lines are blurring between OEMs, the tier one, and say the engineering service providers. Very clearly, in the past, there were clear roles being played, even tier ones delivering subsystems, and these were being integrated by the OEMs. And we were also looking at, as Bosch, towards engineering service provider, more to give competent resources and probably deliver some subsystems, stacks which can be integrated, etc. But now with the digital trends, what you saw in the pace, these boundaries between OEMs, tier one, and the engineering service providers are totally changing. It's quite possible that towards a OEM, as Bosch, we have to deliver integrated or pre solutions because there are no clear-cut the components we can deliver. For example, if a driver assistance has to work, we'll need to pre-integrate some of the solutions between a braking and say driving systems, and the also deliver digital software or software that gets integrated onto vehicle control units. The role that the engineering service providers were providing are going to also completely change. Means in the supply chain, you will see that it's possible for startups as well as engineering service providers to come with proposals which are algorithms that can run on multiple systems. And these algorithms use, for example, the images or video from video cameras or from radar, and can develop algorithm that can run new features for a particular market. So the OEM would obviously give a vehicle platform on which you can host these features, and these features can be delivered directly by tier one or engineering service providers or even startups. This big change, of course, means that also the responsibility that was being clearly taken up by OEMs and the complete supply chain is totally being disrupted. We'll have to think about different business models when we are integrating such solutions coming from various suppliers, be it tier one or engineering service provider, all startups, will completely change. Of course, the systems have to be secure as well as safe. So that way, there are some preconditions we have to take care of. But with continuous deployment, I think it's possible that we can pilot some of the new business models where features are being delivered by multiple suppliers, getting integrated and then tried out on the market. And if there is a success and being accepted by the end user, these could be standard features. That's exactly what's going to happen with Devops. Devops is not just developing software at, say, at Bosch or a tier one similar to Bosch, but also on the complete supply chain between the OEM, tier one, and the stacks that are being delivered by anybody else. These we can probably try out directly on vehicle during field trials. And if these features are giving the expected results, then can be uploaded onto the vehicles. And this is exactly what the West Coast customers are doing today, you see in US. There are new features being released every week. And these features, if they are found satisfying all the requirements of the user, of course, then this can become standard in the next platform that goes out. But the development periods are shrinking because of this, and we have to be much more agile on how we are able to deploy these new features. Of course, I see this more of a benefit for the end user. You may have a standard hardware that's already there on a vehicle, but the software features itself may not be available on day one. And this can be, over the air uploaded afterwards, and you can enjoy the new features. When I meant business model also, it is more on usage. You can charge end user for these features. This is going to be real exciting times because even a small supplier can think about developing a feature and getting few cents for the new feature he has developed. And this can be probably accepted similar to the mobile phones where you download. The preconditions, of course, have to be met in terms of making it safe, but that is, I guess, taken care from functional safety perspective. And there must be, of course, robust systems that are there in the basic system being delivered. But the add-on features can always be more like apps coming onto the vehicle. And this is going to be an opportunity and, of course, a challenge or a complex situation to handle for the OEMs. But that's the direction it's going towards.
Right. Yes. So I think, and since you have, quite a bit you've mentioned about the new age players, as we all know that there are many players who are entering this mobility space currently. So do you see that these might impact the tier one suppliers? You did touch upon the tier one as well, but will there be any specific impact because new age kind of players are like emerging in the market space right now? So what would you have to say about that?
You're absolutely right. The new players that are coming in, and they are coming from a different, starting point. We were interacting with the classic OEMs. We had a clear understanding of how we share responsibility and liability issues on such vehicles. And and also the pace at which we would deploy the new features that are coming onto the vehicles. With the new players coming up in mobility space, it is clear that first of all, of course, the expectation on speed, which is of essence, is completely different. The new age players expect that we are able to react on a daily basis and are able to do daily build and deliver new features, compared to probably earlier times where we used to deliver software once a month or so in terms of upgrade. And even that was more for testing the new features, and SOP had a clear deadline date by which all features gets integrated and then they are sent out to the market. With this changing and expectation of the new age players where they expect that the features are available on the fingertips, we have to reorient the teams, organize ourselves with ups and downs of the expectation. There could be times where we have to deliver features every day to these OEMs, where features are getting integrated from various suppliers. So the number of suppliers that are working with the new age players is also different. Earlier it was by domains. Okay, we could say that simply we deliver a powertrain and somebody else probably delivers a braking system, and third one delivers a video or a radar, and then they integrate it onto the vehicle. And we get a feedback after a couple of weeks or months that we need to work on so that the overall vehicle is functioning the way it was supposed to be. Whereas now we are talking changes that are needed on each one of the subsystems so that they can interact and work better. So in the E architecture, which I explained earlier, there is always a pressure coming back to tier 1 and other service providers to modify the software on short notice to ensure that it works along with other subsystems. And when you go with the Devops, this is possible, but at the same time, we have to make sure that it is secure as well as safe in terms of not creating any challenge on the vehicle. For example, if I talk about having developed a very robust say the radar system, and if this is deployed onto a vehicle like that where it's getting integrated, where they're merging the signals from radar and a video together, we will have to ensure that in a combination this works perfect in partly automated driving systems, a level 2 or level 3. And these, while they can be deployed much faster, while the subsystems all have to work in a tandem, we will never have a situation where we have a complete simulated environment at our end as well, because all are being concurrently developed. So the development cycle itself changes. Sometimes we will not be able to test this on the actual hardware. We need to go more for simulated environments where we are simulating the rest of the vehicle. And we use no longer much of hill in the initial phase, hardware in loop testing, but use more of software in loop. And also include models coming from our competitor as well as other suppliers. So this is a big change for us, of course. And the systems are becoming much more open, where we are able to integrate models from other players and then able to deliver a secure software. All in all, what I'm saying is with usage of the new ways of development, it is possible, but I think we have to be much more agile and open for new, I would say, release procedures that are to be enabled, new validation platforms that are to be enabled, and new infrastructure that's needed for developing systems for these new age players.
Yeah, that pretty much talks about all, clears out all the, whatever we would want to know in terms of the mobility space. That is something that is, that has come into picture recently, and now everybody, since it's an opportunity basically for all the mostly on the engineering service provider in for that particular space. So when we are talking about the service providers, basically, so what are the opportunities you see? I'm sure you have touched upon most of the opportunities so far, but if you could just give us, a few points on what are the opportunities. For example, the different service providers, they would also venture into the mobility space. How would they? I mean, what are the things that they would be benefited of?
Yeah, I think on the engineering service providers, one thing that changes is what gets delivered. As I already mentioned, role of making available competent people who could actually join a larger team and deliver the end result. It's now changing towards handling work packages, managing new functionalities that can be delivered as stacks, which can be integrated either by a tier 1 like Bosch or even OEMs themselves. This is a complete change in our supply chain. If we are able to develop algorithm, for example, in electrified, it can be algorithm for better prediction of what is the lifetime that's available on the back, or whether it is what is the charging speed that's there, or whether there can be better ways of knowing where is the best place to charge your vehicle. These each one, and also use a negotiation between the car and the infrastructure itself. What you see now is the possibility to use different business models while charging and usage of the car. Business model, what I mean, just look at it as selling a car, but also could be selling number of miles of usage of a car based on, and the complete thing can be taken care by a service provider itself. So you find that the aggregators that are also coming up in between are finding different ways of integrating. For example, whether when you talk about the mobility service providers, it is quite possible because of the buying power from the mobility service providers that you source components or subsystems from a OEM as well as tier 1 and a service provider directly, and you actually configure the vehicle of your own, which is best suited for that particular usage pattern. The amount of data that's available can also be analyzed by service provider much more to actually decide how you can optimize a vehicle much better. These were not available earlier with, for example, beyond a OEM, to know how the usage is of the vehicle and what is the area where we can optimize it. Whereas now with the connectivity, there is a lot of services that can be built around mobility space. Third is, of course, I would say on the role a startup could play. When you talk about vehicles, when you see now the video playing a big role. There are videos that are coming within the vehicle and videos coming which is checking the environment outside the vehicle itself. And we can run a lot of on that. And if there are features that can be enabled and offered, this stacks can be actually developed by any service provider and can then be taken up if it's found as a useful feature to check and do analytics on a video. I'm sure either a startup or a service provider can also work directly with tier 1 or a OEM to bring them onto their vehicle. These new avenues that are coming up, I think, would on one side be a technological progress and speed at which we can do it. Second one is new business models that can be played around based on usage that service provider can charge to the end user. So this, I think, opens up a completely new mode of operating, which was not possible before. Of course, one thing that we have to keep in mind is with systems becoming more complex, the cross-domain knowledge becomes also important. So this is one area where developing these competencies so that we are able to think about these features, which are typically coming cross-domain. It is not related to typically a feature for a particular subsystem. It's not just an injection control that you need to do or how you drive a motor or only what you need to do on a battery or a camera. But if you're able to think about features that take input from various subsystems, and if one running these features, you are able to either increase the productivity of the vehicle or running cost if it can reduce, or it can increase the ease of driving a vehicle. I'm sure there would be customers to get these features and integrate into their vehicle. With VCUs, which I mentioned earlier, is a big step. I mean, with vehicles which had 60 to say 80 controllers, now if they move towards more domain controllers, which may be maximum 2 or 3 in a vehicle with high compute platform. These would be open architectures on which you can host these new features. And this is something which is going to be a massive disruption in the future vehicles, where it can be running on different operating systems. So we have to ensure that interoperability is possible. So the stacks that are being developed by service providers can actually be hosted on that. And need not be only for one subsystem which is delivered by a tier 1 like Bosch or somebody. It can be actually developed for multiple subsystems coming from different tier 1s as well. So this is an interesting time, and I guess a lot of opportunities for engineering service providers to innovate in mobility using AI and digital technologies.
Thank you so much. So I think we do have audiences as well. So would you like to share something for the audience today? It's been a very exhaustive learning. I think we've got to know a lot today, which we were pretty much not. We have just been reading up some stuff, but then hearing from you makes a lot of difference, especially to our audience today as well. And of course, when we share it internally with all our the other fellow members as well in the unit, I think they would also be very, very enlightened with whatever we got to know today from your end. So anything you would like to share your thoughts for the audience? Would you like to share some words as well from your end, sir?
Yeah. These what I would like to share with you is aspect of continuous learning. Like I mentioned, the systems are becoming much more complex, and the competencies what we at some point in time have picked up are going to be obsolete very fast. So what I would like to tell each one of you, or request each one of you, is not to stop learning. Keep an open mind. And you might have started in a particular domain, learned about certain systems, but I think you'll have to dedicate some time to learn new technologies, whether it's usage of AI, whether it's machine learning, integrating it with your own domain, trying to upskill yourself so that you're not obsolete suddenly. And this is very, very important, because the speed at which things are changing is much more than what it used to be, say, 20, 30 years back. And at current times, there are open platforms, and any time that you are able to free up, or rather it's more important to free up your time and dedicate so that you're able to continuously upskill and be ready to develop a new space which you wouldn't have thought about before. And with that, I would like to wish you all the best in your learning and applying it in various platforms. And of course, from my point of view, at best in mobility, of course.
Thank you so much. I think it was a very good learn. I think you shared your opinion, your thoughts with us, and a visionary like you giving us so much time today. So we are really, really thankful to have you on board today. And it was really a wonderful session, a pleasure and honor for us to have you here. And thank you, everyone. And it was a pleasure with all of you being today here. A special thanks to the attendees who had been patiently there, and we all have been listening to what Mr. Shenoy had to say, because there's so many things. I mean, I learned new things also today, and I'm definitely going to be sharing it with my peers and the other associates as well. And of course, as you mentioned, we shouldn't stop learning. I think we'll have to, that should be the tagline. And we'll continue learning, we'll continue knowing more. And so thank you so much. And we really wish success and endeavor for your journey ahead. And it's really an honor for us to be associated with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Shenoy.
Yeah. Thanks, Megha. Thanks for organizing this event. Thanks to everybody who participated. And I hope you were able to use this time well. Have a nice day then. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you. You have a wonderful day. Thank you.